In our last video, we saw how the default Cessna 152 performed in virtual reality. How will a payware aircraft like Just Flight's Piper Warrior 2 perform? We'll find out today when we fly from Heritage Field to Brandywine using visual navigation in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Let's hop into the pilot's seat and get started. Just Flight's Piper Warrior looks fantastic in virtual reality, and so far the performance is great too. We've got the Limerick nuclear power station off to the left of the field, and we've also got our buddy Floyd here, rocking a pair of David Clark headphones. That's a mod that I'll put the link for in the description. It's really funky seeing a life-sized Floyd sitting beside me, and it's taking some getting used to. Right now, I'm supposed to be in a real airplane doing my discovery flight. However, if I bring up the weather right now for the airport, 3/4 of a mile visibility, overcast at 2100, broken 1600, and snowing. So you are not flying anywhere VFR in those conditions. So instead, we are flying virtually in Microsoft Flight Simulator. The Piper Warrior has a really good built-in checklist, and it works in virtual reality. So you can see my controller here. We'll head up to the toolbar here, open up the checklist. There we go. And we'll skip the exterior portion since we can't actually get out of the aircraft and move to before starting the engines. So the circuit breakers are in. The carb heat over here is cold. The fuel selector will move to the left fuel tank. And we'll move on to engine start. So we're starting this cold. So we'll start out by cracking the throttle a 1/2 inch. Next, we'll go and get the battery on. We'll turn on the alternator. We'll turn on the navigation lights, which are linked to the audio panel lights here. We'll turn on the fuel pump. There we go. Next, we'll get the mixture to full rich. We'll announce clear prop, so we'll open up the little window here. Clear prop. Now we'll head down to the ignition key and click that over to start. Piece of cake. So now we'll go and adjust our RPM to 1200. That looks good. And next we'll check the oil pressure. And that is in the green. Alright, we'll click over to the taxi page. And we're going to leave the landing light off for now. We're going to head over here and get the avionics switch, excuse me, Floyd, turned on. That's kind of hidden behind the right side yoke. There we go. Next we'll get all of our radios on. So COM 1, NAV 1, COM 2, NAV 2. Get our transponder to standby. And we're going to dial in 1200 because we'll be squawking VFR for this. A little bit fiddly here. There we go. Alright. So next we will want to close this, and I want to dial in all my nav frequencies, and for that I'm going to use our new plugin. So I've got FS Kneeboard. FS Kneeboard works in virtual reality. It has a moving map, which is open street maps with an aeronautical overlay. It's pretty good. It's not a sectional, but it's pretty good for navigation. It shows you all the airspaces and the airports. And if you zoom in on the map, it'll give you some of the field information, So if you zoom in and we find a field up here, see data popping up. So it'll give you the field elevation. It'll also sometimes give you the tower frequency. It's in meters. Unfortunately, there's no way to convert it to feet for field elevation, but not bad. Now you can also add your own charts and sectionals. So I've downloaded the sectional for this area and put it into the charts folder. Now it needs to resize it, and it's a little slow sometimes, but there it is. There's the sectional. Now glancing at this, even if I move this closer and move my face right up next to it, I can't read the text on it. And that's not just because it's virtual reality. I had the same problem in 2D with it. It's because of the resizing. And unfortunately, you're limited to how far you can zoom in. But you can fix this. If you can click onto the corner correctly here, you can just make the entire window bigger. And it's going to take it a little while to resize. And once it does, there you go. Now I can read all the text. So this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. I wanted to have VFR sectionals in virtual reality that I could grab with the control and move around. So you can see we are departing from Heritage Field. That's where we flew to in our last flight. And we're going to, depending on the winds, depart from runway 28 or 10. If we depart runway 28, either we can go around the block in the pattern, it has right pattern traffic, or we can do a straight out departure and loop around the Limerick Power Station. We're going to follow the Schuylkill River until we get to the hairpin turn, and then we're going to pick up Route 9 till it intersects with the Turnpike. Intersects with 76, and then pick up 202. So we've got our CTAF frequency. I was just pointing at it there on the sectional, so we're going to head over to here and dial that into COM1. And I will tell you, and I don't know if it's the Just Flight virtual controls or if this is how it's working for all the aircraft, but it doesn't work like you expect. So you kind of expect you can point and twist your wrist. That's how it would work in X-Plane. But instead you kind of like click part on the dial and drag it around and orbit it. And it's definitely very fiddly. The big dial, not so bad. The little dial here, yeah, it's like a random number generator. So as you move it around, it'll jump from 50 to 90 back to 11. It's not going sequentially, and you just have to try harder. So we're trying to get 121.5, which is guard for COM2, and I've got the 121 part. We're gonna get the 5. Let's try twisting my wrist. Okay, and I'm about to snap my wrist. Let's stop twisting my wrist. Okay, go back up to orbiting. Sure, just pick any number. All right, well, today guard is on 121.97. Close enough. That's one of the quirks of VR. So we'll look at Brandywine's CTAF, and we'll put that over here on the standby for COM1. And why isn't that working? And that's because it's not COM1 standby. That is the nav one. Well, that explains a lot. Alright, so I will stop trying to put a COM frequency into there, and instead let's go up to the map and we'll look at the VOR. So we've got Pottstown VOR, that's 116.5. We'll dial that in here. We are not planning on using the VOR for navigation. This is an eyeball type of flight, but it never hurts to have a plan B. Now we actually have to go and flick these little switches over to on for it to work. So you can see that the CDI just came to life when we did that. Here's another cool feature of FS Kneeboard. It's got a notepad and you can write using the VR controller. So sure, I'm writing hi here and putting a cute smiley face, but this could just as well be a frequency that I just got from ATC or a pattern entry instruction. You can type notes using a virtual keyboard. You can write them with the controller. It even syncs with your iPad, so you could write on your iPad with a stylus and have it appear on the notepad instantly. Really nice plugin. Alright, so we've got our transponder set, our radios are set. Next up, we've got to get our altimeter set. And normally we would listen to the ATIS, however I'm cheating here because the weather is really horrible as you saw today, so I'm not running with live weather, but with clear skies, so I just hit the B key to cut to the chase and sync the altimeter. For the heading, I like to set the departure runway heading so that we depart on the correct runway, and we'll use the heading bug here, and I'm twisting, and I'm twisting, and once again we've got a random number generator for what the bug is doing, so yeah, we didn't really need that feature. We'll just we just won't use the heading bug. Alright, so we could close that, and yeah, I think we're looking pretty good here. We'll get our pitot heat on while we're at it. We've got the windsock right in front of us, so you can see that the wind is coming from our right. That's out of 270, so we're going to take off on our left here from runway 28. You always want to take off flying into the wind. Because we got this tugger driver in front of us, we're not going to turn left, but we're going to turn right and do a full circle to get to the taxiway. So with that, I think we're ready to make our CTAF call. We'll close up the window here before heading out. Make our call. Looks clear on the right. Heritage Field traffic, Warrior 276 November Delta, taxi runway 28 Heritage Field. So those steam clouds coming off of the cones up ahead are a new addition. That's a separate plugin called We Love VFR. They have it by region, and it adds all sorts of things like towers, radio dishes, smoke coming out of factory stacks or nuclear power plants. So if you like flying VFR, be sure to get it. Alright, while we're taxiing, I'll tell you about my discovery flight. So the weather is horrible today. We're getting a couple inches of snow. Tomorrow afternoon looks nice and sunny with calm winds, blue skies, clouds at like 19,000 feet. So I rescheduled for tomorrow afternoon and had a 2 p.m. confirmed. But as I was doing this video, my flight instructor called me and he can't make it. So tomorrow's a no-go. We've got another winter storm coming in this weekend. We're supposed to get 7 inches of snow, so this weekend's a bust. So we are tentatively scheduled for the following weekend. So I can wait a little while longer. On the plus side, the further we go into March, the warmer and nicer it's going to get. So hopefully we'll have some sunny days for my first flight. So we are coming up to the run-up area, which is on the left here, and also on the left here is a very unfortunate example of photogrammetry gone wrong. So sometimes the photogrammetry looks like an apocalyptic event has happened with melted buildings and cars and trees that look like pyramids, and that's exactly what's going on down here. So just ignore that. In my last video I couldn't do a run-up because I couldn't get a checklist into VR, but now I've got an aircraft that has a really nice checklist. So we'll bring up the run-up checklist. So this is under ground check. Alright, our parking brake is down here. That is set. Our mixture is too rich. Our throttle will increase up to 2,000 RPM. Alright, that looks good. Next we'll head down here to our magnetos. Mag left, we'll look for the RPM drop. Mag right, look for the RPM drop. Back to both. Next up is vacuum. Let's see. It's not here. It's not over here. Maybe over here? There we go. So there's the vacuum. That looks good. Next is ammeter. Nope. Not down there. Let's see. Not on the left. I think I'm used to the Skyhawk. I'm sure there's an ammeter around here someplace. How about over here? Oh, I spy it. It's right there. It's down underneath the yoke. Got it. Alright, that looks good. And we checked our oil temp and pressure. Now we'll do the annunciator check to make sure that our lights illuminate. So that's this little switch here. Click. Click. Hello. Click, click. Click. Please, click. Okay. Well, I'm sure all of those switches are working. Alright, our carb heat is too cold. Our fuel pump is now off. We'll check our fuel pressure with the fuel pump off. That also looks good. And next we'll go over and get our engine to idle. Now we're looking for 650 RPM. And I noticed on the Piper Warrior it never goes down to 650 in the model here, so I don't know if the checklist is wrong or the model's wrong. But we'll call that good. And now we're going to bring this back up to 1200 RPM. And it looks good, at least according to our ground check. Nothing's going to break on our plane. So now we'll do the before takeoff checklist. Make sure that our battery switch is on, alternator is on, get the landing light on. Next we'll go down and get our fuel tank to the fullest tank. Okay, we'll go back and check our engine gauges once again. Make sure that our mixture is also to full rich. Now we'll check that the primer is locked. Sure there's a primer around here someplace. It could be that silver thing there. That could also be a friction lock, but I'm going to pretend it's the primer. Next we'll get our flaps, and we can actually grab these with the controller, so I will do flaps 1 here. Let's verify that our trim is set for takeoff. That's between the 2 seats here, and that is to neutral. That looks good. Our doors are closed and latched. Good job, Floyd. And we click over to the takeoff checklist. We're going to rotate at 55. And the one thing these checklists omit is telling you to put your transponder into mode C. So let's do that now. And that looks good. Now we could make a CTAF call, I guess, saying that we're going to taxi 15 feet over to the hold short line over there. But I think we'll just look over our shoulder and make sure it's clear and taxi. In a towered airport, you'd have to call up ground to get permission to continue. Alright, we are clear on our left, and our right we'll make our CTAF call. Heritage Field traffic, Warrior 276 November Delta, departing runway 28, straight out departure, climbing 2000, Heritage Field. Alright, game on. So this is a really cool airport. As we swing around onto the runway here, you've got the nuclear power cones both off to the left there. And we are doing a straight out departure, so we're going to fly right by them. I wonder what it's like to fly out of this airport in real life. It must be a really cool departure coming off of runway 28. Airspeed's alive, and we are good to rotate. A little sluggish pulling up there, but here we go. Let's get back on center line. There we go. Got the cooling towers coming up. We are clear of the trees. So we're waiting for 400 feet above ground before we pull our flaps up. So that'll be about 700 feet. Meanwhile, we're going to maintain runway heading. Check out that view. Alright, we're at 700 feet. We're going to pull our flaps up. There we go. Push the lever down and pull the nose back up because it dropped a bit. And in VR, this is crazy. I talked about this before. You know, those look okay to you probably in 2D, but for me, they're life-sized. Everything in VR is 1-to-1 scale. So those are 500-foot tall nuclear cooling towers. It's wild. Okay, so remember, field elevation was 300 feet. So pattern altitude. Whoa! Did the world just wink out of existence for everybody else? It's back now. Don't you hate when that happens? I have no idea what just went on there, but we'll keep on going. So I was saying that traffic pattern altitude is 1,000 feet above field elevation by default, unless it's called out. And I like to get to 500 feet above traffic pattern altitude before making any turns if I'm doing a straight out departure. So that means that 700 feet, I'm sorry, that means 1,300 feet is traffic pattern altitude and 1,700 is 500 above. So we are there, which means we are free to make our turn. And we're going to make a nice arc here, keeping the power station on our left and of course the field on our left. We've got the Schuylkill River on our left. Now our goal is to follow the Schuylkill River, and eventually we want to jog back over to the north of it because we're going to be looking out for some sights and it'll just be easier to see from that side. So there's the Schuylkill River just off of our wingtip. Got a nice standard rate turn here. See that on the turn coordinator. We're a good distance from the plant. And we're leveling off here. I'm just a little bit above 2,000. So we'll talk about altitudes a little bit. So for VFR flying, if you're flying east, specifically on a magnetic heading between 0 and 180, then you should fly an odd altitude plus 500, starting at 3,500. And if you're flying west, then you should fly an even altitude plus 500, starting at 2,500. But if you're flying below 2,500, then it's kind of a free-for-all. I think the minimum safe altitude is 500 per the FAA, but between 500 and 2,500, you could pretty much fly any altitude that's appropriate for where you're at. And I've chosen 2,000 in this case because we're going to be flying underneath the Bravo shelf. So that shelf starts at 3,500, which is why I don't want to fly at 3,500. Which means I can really pick anything, and I think 2,000 will give us some really nice sightseeing. We're going to be looking for roads and landmarks, and that'll be a good altitude for us to see what's going on. Alright, we're going to turn a little bit here and start jogging over to the north side of the Schuylkill River. This entire area of the Philly Bravo plus the adjacent airports is all 3D photogrammetry. It's one of the reasons I like to fly in this area. Sometimes people ask if I'm from this area because I do a lot of flights out of it, but I'm not. It's got just great landscape and graphics, and I like to fly these visual eyeball flights. I like to pretend I'm a VFR pilot, and if you're a VFR pilot, you are using roads, and you're using churches, and you're using shopping centers and rivers and lakes as your landmarks. You may do a flight where you're just going from lake to lake to lake and then following a river back. You're not relying on your instruments as much as a simulator pilot would. A sim pilot's going to be looking at his console constantly and flying precise headings. Probably because before Microsoft Flight Simulator, you were really limited in the realism of the landscape, so you're limited in being able to pick up things. But here, you know, here, like I can spot specific buildings. There's a landmark we're going to look for, which is I think it's a manufacturer, but they've got like a big complex and plant. And yeah, you can look for that exact building and spot it from the air. You can spot, see those blue buildings down there? You know, you can spot schools or fields. Alright, on our right here, we've got that hairpin turn that's in the Schuylkill River. That's very distinctive, and that's right at the outside of the Philly Bravo. That's going to be our turning point. On our left-hand side here, if we give it a minute, that manufacturer that I mentioned is going to come into view. So that plant is right around here, and it has sort of a distinct radial shape to it. There it is. So that's GlaxoSmithKline, and it's right about where this hairpin turn is. So just past the turn, we are going to turn right, and we are looking for two bridges. One of those two bridges is Bridge Street, and that's going to head south. And I've got it just off my right there. I can see the bridge going over the Schuylkill River. That's Bridge Street. So as we turn this way and start following Bridge Street, we're going to keep our eyes peeled and try to pick up Route 9. That's also going to be north-south, and we're going to try to follow that and look for 76. Now off to our left here is Pickering Creek Reservoir. I did not know that at the time that I did this. I'm adding this voiceover post-flight, but when I was doing the flight, I looked at it, I was like, oh, okay, that's a very distinct body of water. Those are usually on sectionals. So if I want to know if I made my turn at the right place, I can pull up the sectional and I can probably find that. They'll actually draw the shape of that body of water on the sectional. And it's also got that little track. Did you see that track by it? So if I pull up FSD board here, and I'm going to toggle over to the VFR sectional, and I'm going to have to resize it, which is going to take a little time for it to get all loaded up. We could check that out. So here's a golf club. This is Pickering Valley Golf Club. A lot of times golf courses will have dots on the sectional called out as a golf course because they're so easy to spot from the air that they make good landmarks. That looks really good. Alright, our sectional is loaded up, and if we look at it, yep, sure enough I see it. So there's that body of water that was Pickering Reservoir, and it's even got the track next to it and the road that we want to follow. So cool, we turned at the right place and we were able to match up a landmark with what we can see on the VFR sectional. Now I'm looking for the PA Turnpike, and I'm expecting it to cut right across the front of my plane here because it goes east-west, and I'm not seeing it. Now I'm adding this in post. That line off my wing there is the turnpike. That does not look like the turnpike to me though. So as I'm sitting here in VR in the plane looking all around, I'm not looking at that and thinking, oh yeah, that's the PA Turnpike. It just looks like a small road. So here's where things start to go awry because I'm having trouble locating the next leg of the trip, which was I was looking for where 9 was going to cross the turnpike. So we'll keep our eyes peeled and see if we can spot anything that's going to help us figure out exactly where we are and get our bearings. I'm going to resist the urge to open up the GPS. Remember, this is an eyeball flight, so we're trying to do this just with planning and eyeballs. So we've got a blue field off to our left here. That looks like a stadium, and it turns out that's Great Valley Patriots Stadium. So that would be a good reference when planning this flight. Now I didn't spot that in my my for-flight planning, but it would have been good to go to the satellite view and look for things like that, things that are like blue or have an unusual color to them that I could spot from the air easily. And I've also got a north-south road going off my left wing there, and another one going off my right wing. So one of those might be Route 9. I'm not sure. Gotta pick one, or I could pick neither and keep flying straight down the middle of them, which is, I think, what I'm going to do. So we'll keep on going. Now our goal is to get to 202. And if we can find 202, that's going to take us directly to Brandywine Airport. So we got another small track there. That's Church Farm School. Sometimes they'll draw those on sectionals. There was one on the sectional for the northern track that we saw by the reservoir in Pickering. Again, we still have that road going off of our left wing. And now I'm starting to get nervous because it feels like we've been flying much too long for the length of the flight. Off to my left, this turns out to be Route 130, which is different than what I was looking for. And off to my left, I see some blue here, and that's a quarry. And that's Lehigh Hansen Quarry, which I did not see at all in my flight planning. I would have marked quarry down because that's an easy thing to spot. So now I've got this sinking feeling that I am lost. I've gone too far in one direction and I'm nowhere near here. So after talking it over with Floyd, he agrees. Let's, put our tail between our legs and open up the GPS and see where we're really at, because we never found the PA Turnpike, and we thought we found the intersection we're looking for, but it doesn't seem to match with what we're seeing here. So when we open up FS board and put on the live map, there we are. We've got the airport behind us, and we're flying away from it. So the good news is we kind of got close to the airport, but then we started following the wrong road. And if I paid attention to the heading, it probably would have tipped me off. So we've turned around, we're back on track, and I remember that there's a lake right next to Brandywine, and I remember the shape of it, and there it is off the left side of my nose. So that's a good sign. I can't see the field yet, but I can see the lake that I know that is next to the field. So that means I know where I expect the field to be, and those kind of look like hangars. I think that might be the field, although I still can't see the runway. So I'm going to assume that's the field and enter the left downwind for it. We're a little bit close. We've got our wing overlapping it. We'd like to have our wing just touching it. But our altitude is spot on for traffic pattern altitude. Now as we get abeam the numbers, I'll bring in my first notch of flaps, and then we're going to start flying downhill. You can see that we're going downhill on the vertical speed indicator. And I'm going to turn base here. So we do a CTAF call when we're turning base. We would have done one for entering the pattern as well. And the general rule of thumb is you want the airport at the 45-degree angle over your shoulder, behind you when you turn base. However, when I'm flying here in the simulator, it's kind of a combination of things. It depends on the terrain, where if the airport's over my left shoulder, if I know I'm going to have to, say, drop in after some elevated terrain, which in this case I'm looking at what's ahead of me, and then we've got some trees on a hill that I'm going to have to maintain altitude to fly over, and then I'm going to have to drop after those. So that's all affecting where I turn for my base. Here we are turning final. In virtual reality, this is awesome because you can tilt your head and look around and see where you're going. And we lined up pretty well there. So I've got these trees. Gotta keep over them. And then once we're clear of the trees, we've got another set there on short final. Now I find the Piper Warrior likes to be flown a little bit fast coming in. There we go. Lined up fairly nicely on center line. Ooh, but the landing was a little bit harder than I wanted, but not bad. Alright, we've got our flaps up, and we should be able to make the first turn off here. So looking around, I think that straight ahead is the best bet. Now that we're past the old short lines, we can make our CTAF call that we are clear of the runway. We're going to turn into one of these parking spots right here. Brakes and nose wheels on the grass. Well, close enough. Alright, we'll get our parking brake on, and we can start shutting everything down. So that was awesome. It was really great performance for just Flight's Piper Warrior. I was happy to see that because sometimes the pay-aware aircraft are a bit more demanding, but it was great. It was fun doing a visual flight, even if I had to cheat a little bit and use the GPS at the end, but I knew it was going to be a little bit harder because the landmarks aren't as prominent as the last flight I did, which had things like, you know, nuclear cooling towers that you could spot from miles and miles away. So thanks for flying along with me as always. If you enjoy content like this, be sure to click that like button, leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again, and stay tuned for further flight adventures.